The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their assigned seats, shouting at each other in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal, or electronic beeps. The translation devices worked hard to turn all these sounds into words everyone could understand. Ambassador Kyung-ho sat in the human section, watching the chaos with calm eyes. He had seen this same fight many times before. The tall, blue-skinned Veltari were arguing with the crystal beings called Zephyrians about mining rights on some distant planet. The bug-like Korthak clicked their mandibles angrily as they complained about food shipments being late. Next to Kyung-ho, his assistant Ji-woo looked through her digital tablet. She frowned as she read the latest reports from human colonies across the galaxy. Something strange was happening, but she wasn't sure what it meant yet. "The Veltari have no right to claim that system," shouted Velnash, the lead Veltari representative. His telepathic thoughts were translated into spoken words by the machines around the room. "Our ships found it first." The Zephyrian delegate flashed different colors of light, which the translators turned into angry words. "Your people only found empty space. We found the valuable crystals beneath the planet's surface. The minerals belong to us." Other species joined the argument. The rock-like rocklings rumbled their disagreement. The gas cloud nebulans changed shape to show their anger. Soon, half the council chamber was shouting at the other half. Kyung-ho had heard this exact same fight last month, and the month before that. Different planets, different resources, but always the same anger and mistrust. The humans usually helped solve these problems. They would find ways for both sides to share the resources or take turns mining different areas. But today felt different. Ji-woo leaned over to whisper in Kyung-ho's ear. "Sir, I've been reading the personnel reports. Something odd is happening." Kyung-ho nodded for her to continue, never taking his eyes off the arguing aliens. "Human staff are being pulled back from council stations everywhere," Ji-woo said quietly. "The peacekeeping force in the Antares sector, all humans reassigned. The translation center on Proxima Station, humans transferred out. Even the first contact teams in the Outer Rim are being called home." This got Kyung-ho's attention. He turned to look at Ji-woo's tablet screen. The numbers were clear. Over the past 3 months, humans had been quietly leaving their positions throughout the galaxy. Not fired or dismissed, but reassigned or transferred back to human space. "Who authorized this?" Kyung-ho asked. "Earth Command," Ji-woo replied. "Direct orders from the President herself." On the council floor, the argument was getting worse. The Veltari ambassador had stood up and was pointing accusingly at the Zephyrian section. The crystal beings were flashing angry red lights. Several other species were taking sides, choosing who to support in the dispute. Council leader Zal Theron, a tall alien with 4 arms and silver skin, banged his ceremonial staff on the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, but few paid attention. The fighting continued. Kyung-ho watched as species that had been allies for decades now glared at each other with suspicion. Trade partners were threatening to cut off all business. Military allies were withdrawing their support for joint operations. "They're falling apart," Ji-woo observed quietly. "Yes," Kyung-ho agreed. "And they don't even see it happening." For 50 years, humans had served as mediators in the Galactic Council. When 2 species couldn't agree, they came to the humans for help finding a solution. When communication failed between different types of beings, humans built better translation systems. When new species were discovered, humans led the first contact missions because they were good at understanding different cultures. The humans never asked to be mediators. It just happened naturally. Other species found that humans were good listeners and fair judges. They didn't play favorites or try to benefit only themselves. When humans suggested a compromise, both sides usually accepted it. But the other species had started taking this help for granted. They expected humans to solve their problems. When humans gave advice, the aliens often ignored it, then came back asking for help when things went wrong. Just last month, Kyung-ho had warned the council about growing tensions in the Outer Rim. Pirates were attacking trade ships, and several species were blaming each other. He suggested sending peacekeeping forces to protect the shipping lanes. The council voted down his proposal, saying it was too expensive. Now those same trade routes were becoming dangerous. Ships were being robbed or destroyed. The species were still blaming each other, but now they wanted human mediators to fix the problem they had ignored. The argument on the council floor was reaching a peak. Velnash was shouting about Veltari honor and ancient claims to the disputed system. The Zephyrians were flashing lights so quickly that the translators couldn't keep up. Other species were joining in, turning the dispute into a dozen different fights. Kyung-ho quietly gathered his papers and put them in his briefcase. Ji-woo watched him with surprise. "Sir, are we leaving?" "Yes," Kyung-ho said simply. "We're leaving, but the session isn't over. They haven't voted on the mining rights dispute." Kyung-ho stood up and looked around the chamber one last time. Dozens of alien species were shouting at each other, unable to find any common ground. The same species that had once worked together to explore the galaxy and build a peaceful civilization. "They've made their choice, Ji-woo," he said quietly. "For months we've warned them about the consequences of their behavior. We've offered solutions, compromises, ways to work together. They've rejected every suggestion and blamed us when their problems got worse." Ji-woo began gathering her own materials. "What happens now?" "Now they learn what the galaxy looks like without human help." As Kyung-ho and Ji-woo walked toward the exit, a few other human delegates joined them. Word was spreading through the human section that it was time to go. One by one, the human representatives stood up and quietly left their seats. The aliens were too busy arguing to notice at first. But slowly, some of them began to see the empty human section. The species who had worked closely with humans over the years looked confused and worried. Council leader Zaltharon finally noticed the humans leaving. He banged his staff again, harder this time. "Ambassador Kyung-ho," he called out. "Where are the human representatives going? This session is not finished." Kyung-ho paused at the exit and turned back. The entire chamber had gone quiet, waiting for his answer. Even the angriest species stopped their shouting to listen. "The humans are going home," Kyung-ho said in a clear, calm voice. "We've served this council faithfully for 50 years. We've mediated your disputes, built your communication systems, and kept peace in your territories. But you no longer want our help. You've made that very clear." "That's not true," Zaltharon protested. "The humans are valued members of this council." "Valued?" Kyung-ho almost smiled. "You vote against our proposals. You ignore our warnings. You blame us when our predictions come true. That's not how you treat something you value." The chamber remained silent. Many of the alien representatives looked uncomfortable, like children caught misbehaving. "The humans will honor all existing treaties and agreements," Kyung-ho continued. "But we will no longer volunteer our services as mediators, peacekeepers, or problem solvers. You want to handle your own affairs? Good luck." With that, the last of the human delegation walked out of the chamber. The great doors closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo louder than all the earlier shouting. Inside the chamber, dozens of alien species sat in stunned silence, suddenly realizing they were alone with their problems for the first time in half a century. 3 months had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council chambers. At first, many of the alien species thought the humans would come back after a few days. They believed it was just a dramatic gesture, a way to get attention or make a point. They were wrong. Council Secretary Theximar sat in his office, staring at reports that made his blue skin turn pale with worry. As a Veltari, he could sense the emotions of other beings around him, and lately those emotions had been fear, confusion, and anger. The problems had started small. Communication errors between different species that used to be fixed quickly now took weeks to resolve. The Universal Translation System, which had allowed all the different alien races to understand each other perfectly, was breaking down. Theximar remembered that humans had been the ones who built and maintained those translation systems. They understood how different minds worked and could create programs that turned thoughts into words that everyone could understand. Without humans constantly updating and fixing the translators, they were starting to fail. He pulled up a report from the trade sector. Zephyrian crystal haulers and Korthak food ships were avoiding each other completely. A simple misunderstanding about shipping schedules had turned into a major dispute because neither species could communicate clearly with the other. What should have been a 5-minute conversation to fix the problem had become a month-long argument. The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Council leader Zaltharon entered, his forearms carrying data tablets filled with more bad news. His silver skin looked dull, and his usually confident posture was slumped with worry. "The situation is getting worse," Zaltharon said without greeting. He placed the tablets on Theximar's desk. "Look at these reports." Theximar picked up the first tablet. It showed incident reports from the Outer Rim territories. Pirate attacks had increased by 300%. The human peacekeeping forces that used to patrol those areas were gone, and no other species had stepped in to replace them. What about the Veltari fleet? Thexamar asked. Can't we send our ships to patrol? Our ships don't have the same communication systems the humans used, Saltheron replied. When we try to coordinate with other species' fleets, nothing works properly. The Rocklings use sound-based commands that interfere with our telepathic signals. The Zephyrians communicate with light patterns that our equipment can't read. Thexamar picked up another tablet. This one showed supply chain disruptions across 12 different star systems. Food shortages on some planets, mineral shortages on others. The complex network of trade that had kept the galaxy's economy running smoothly was falling apart. The humans used to manage most of the trade coordination, Thexamar said quietly. They could speak with all the different species and make sure everyone got what they needed. I know, Zaltheron said bitterly, but we can't admit that publicly. The Council would lose all credibility. On Earth, Dr. So-Young sat in her research lab watching news feeds from across the galaxy. Her colleague Taman stood beside her, both of them studying the data streaming across their screens. The breakdown is happening faster than we predicted, So-Young said, pointing to a graph showing communication failures. Look at this. Interspecies cooperation has dropped by 60% in just 3 months. Taman shook his head. I didn't think they would fall apart this quickly. We thought they had learned enough from working with us to manage on their own. We overestimated them, So-Young replied. They never learned how to solve problems themselves. They just waited for us to fix everything. The screen showed images from various planets, protests on Veltari worlds where food shipments were delayed, Zephyrian mining stations shut down because they couldn't get replacement equipment, Korthak agricultural planets struggling with distribution problems. The irony is, Taman observed, these aren't even difficult problems to solve. With proper communication and coordination, these issues could be fixed in days. But they don't have proper communication, So-Young said, and they never learned how to coordinate with each other without us as intermediaries. Meanwhile, in the human colonies of the Outer Rim, life was very different. Governor Hai-Jin of New Sol Colony reviewed her daily reports with satisfaction. Trade with other human settlements was up 20%. Their defense fleet had successfully protected 3 convoys from pirate attacks. Most importantly, they were completely independent from the Galactic Council. Ma'am, her aide reported, we've received another request from the Antares station. They want to hire human security guards to protect their trading post. Hai-Jin nodded. Tell them our rates have doubled since we're no longer working for the Council. If they want human expertise, they need to pay for it properly. This was happening throughout human space. The aliens who had taken human services for granted were now discovering how much those services were worth. Human colonies were becoming wealthy by selling the same services they used to provide for free through the Council. Back in the Council chambers, an emergency session was underway. The usual seats were filled with representatives from various species, but the empty human section seemed to draw everyone's attention. The situation in the Outer Rim is unacceptable, declared the Korthak representative, clicking his mandibles in agitation. Our food convoys are being attacked daily. Where is the Council fleet? The Council fleet is spread too thin, Saltheron replied. We're trying to coordinate defense efforts, but our communication systems aren't compatible with all member species. This never happened when the humans were managing security, grumbled a Rockling representative, his voice like grinding stone. Several other species murmured agreement, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The humans had been good at their jobs, but admitting that now would be embarrassing. We need to adapt, Zaltheron said firmly. We managed to govern the galaxy before humans joined the Council. We can do it again. But even as he spoke the words, Zaltheron knew they weren't true. The galaxy had been a much simpler place 50 years ago. There were fewer species in the Council, fewer trade routes to manage, fewer conflicts to resolve. The complexity of modern galactic civilization required the kind of coordination that humans had provided. What about hiring human consultants? Suggested the Zephyrian representative, flashing diplomatic blue lights. They don't have to rejoin the Council officially. We could contract their services. Absolutely not, Zaltheron said quickly. The Council must handle its own affairs. We will not go begging to the humans. But privately, he was already wondering if that might be their only option. The reports on his desk painted a clear picture. Without human mediation, the Galactic Council was slowly breaking apart. That evening, as Thexamar worked late in his office, he received a priority message from the frontier worlds. The Outer Rim colonies were reporting something alarming. Several of the independent human settlements had formed their own defense alliance. They were protecting trade routes and maintaining order in sectors that the Council could no longer patrol effectively. The message included video, footage of human warships escorting alien freighters safely through pirate-infested space. The aliens were paying good money for this protection, money that used to go to the Council's treasury. Thexamar realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just refusing to help the Council anymore. They were building their own version of what the Council used to be, and they were doing it better. He opened his computer and began typing a confidential report to Zaltharon. The message was simple but devastating. The humans aren't coming back, and we're not going to survive without them. But he knew Zaltharon would never send that message. The Council leaders' pride wouldn't allow it, so they would continue pretending they could handle everything alone, even as their civilization crumbled around them. Outside his window, Thexamar could see the lights of the Council station dimming as various systems failed. The humans used to maintain those too, he remembered. Soon even the lights might go out. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about taking things for granted, but by the time they fully understood what they had lost, it might be too late to get it back. 6 months after humanity left the Galactic Council, the first real crisis arrived. It came in the form of sleek bioorganic ships that appeared at the edge of Council space without warning. The Vorthon Empire had been quiet for decades, content to stay in their distant corner of the galaxy. But now they were moving. The Vorthon bioships were alive, grown rather than built. They moved through space like giant sea creatures, their hulls pulsing with internal organs and their weapons shooting streams of acidic plasma. Most terrifying of all, they were smart. Each ship could think and adapt to new situations. Admiral Velkarath of the Veltari fleet received the first reports while reviewing patrol schedules at his command station. His blue skin turned pale as he read the details. 3 Vorthon bioships had attacked a mining colony in the Kepler system. The colony's defenses had been completely destroyed, and the Vorthons had taken control of the entire system. "Get me a communication link to the other fleet commanders," Velkarath ordered his aide. But that's when the first problem became clear. The communication systems that used to link all Council military forces had been maintained by human technicians. Without them, the different alien fleets couldn't coordinate properly. Velkarath tried to contact the Zephyrian crystal ships, but their light-based communication system interfered with his telepathic command network. When he attempted to reach the Korthak insect swarms, their pheromone signals were completely incompatible with Veltari technology. It took 3 days just to arrange a basic military meeting. The War Council that finally gathered was a disaster from the start. Representatives from 6 different species sat around a table, each trying to communicate in their own way. The translation systems worked for basic conversation, but military terminology was too complex and specific. When Velkarath said flanking maneuver, the translators turned it into side movement for the Rocklings, approach from angle for the Zephyrians, and something that roughly meant confusing dance for the Korthak. "We need to coordinate our response," Velkarath tried to explain. "The Vorthons are using hit-and-run tactics. They strike fast and disappear before we can respond." The Rockling Admiral, Granite Voice, rumbled his disagreement. "Rocklings do not run. We advance directly and crush the enemy." "That won't work against bioships," protested Crystal Song, the Zephyrian fleet commander. Her crystalline body flashed worried orange lights. "They adapt to direct attacks. We need to use multiple approaches." The Korthak swarm leader, Queen Warrior Buzzkill, clicked her mandibles rapidly. The translator turned her complex chemical signals into simple words. "Many small attacks better than few big attacks." "That's exactly what I was trying to say," Velkarath said in frustration. "But we need to time our attacks together. If we attack separately, the Vorthons will defeat us one fleet at a time." But coordinating the timing proved impossible. The Veltari used telepathic time links that the other species couldn't access. The Zephyrians measured time by light pulses that meant nothing to solid matter beings. The Rocklings thought in geological timescales that were useless for space battles. On his retirement planet, Former Admiral Hyun-sik watched news reports of the first major battle with growing concern. He had commanded the Unified Council Defense Force for 15 years before stepping down. The human military doctrine had been simple: overwhelming coordination and superior communication. "They're going to get slaughtered," he told his wife as they watched the news together. The battle footage proved him right. 3 council fleets had arrived at the contested system at different times, with different battle plans, and using incompatible communication systems. The Veltari fleet arrived first and engaged the Vorthons alone. When the Zephyrian ships appeared 2 hours later, they couldn't coordinate with the ongoing battle and ended up firing on empty space where they thought Vorthon ships should be. The Korthak swarm arrived last and found chaos. Without proper communication, they couldn't tell which ships were enemies and which were allies. Some of the insect fighters accidentally attacked Veltari vessels, thinking they were Vorthon bioships. The result was predictable. The Vorthon forces, though outnumbered 3-1, defeated the council fleets in detail. Each alien fleet fought bravely, but they fought alone. The bioships adapted to each species' tactics and weapons, learning and evolving with each encounter. When the battle ended, the council had lost 60% of their ships, and the Vorthons controlled 3 more star systems. On Earth, President Min Seo received her security briefing with calm attention. Defense Minister Jong-soo presented the intelligence reports from the Vorthon conflict. "Their expansion is accelerating," Jong-soo reported. "They're specifically targeting systems where council species have boundary disputes or communication problems." "Smart," Min Seo observed. "They're exploiting the weaknesses we used to help them resolve." "The council sent us an official communication yesterday," Jong-soo continued. "They demand that humanity fulfill its obligations to the galactic community and provide military assistance." Min Seo raised an eyebrow. "Demand, not request?" "Demand. They claim we have a moral duty to help defend civilized space." "Did they mention that we warned them about vulnerabilities in their defense coordination system?" Min Seo asked. "Or that they voted down our proposals to improve interfleet communication?" "No," Jong-soo replied. "They seem to have forgotten those details." The president looked out her window at the bustling city below. Earth had changed significantly since leaving the council. Without the constant demands to mediate alien disputes and provide free services, humanity had focused on their own development. Technology had advanced rapidly. The population was more prosperous than ever. "What's the status of our colonial defense forces?" Min Seo asked. "Better than ever. The Outer Rim colonies have formed a mutual defense pact. Admiral Hyun-sik came out of retirement to help organize them. They're using new ship designs and advanced coordination systems." Min Seo smiled slightly. "I imagine the council wouldn't be interested in hearing about our improved capabilities." "Probably not. They still think of us as the helpful mediators who used to solve their problems for free." Meanwhile, the Vorthon expansion continued. Their strategy was brilliantly simple. They attacked at the boundaries between different species' territories, where communication failures and cultural misunderstandings prevented effective cooperation. They struck where Veltari space met Zephyrian territory. Knowing the 2 species couldn't coordinate their response quickly enough, they hit trade routes used by multiple species, counting on bureaucratic delays to prevent unified action. Within another month, the Vorthons controlled 17 star systems. Refugees fled toward the galactic core, but even humanitarian efforts were hampered by the breakdown in interspecies cooperation. Veltari refugee ships couldn't explain their needs to Zephyrian aid workers. Medical supplies from Korthak worlds were incompatible with Rockling biology due to database errors. Food shipments meant for one species were poisonous to another. Dr. So Young and her research team continued documenting the collapse from their lunar facility. The data was worse than their most pessimistic predictions. "It's not just military coordination," she explained to Taemin during their daily review. "The entire support structure is failing. They can't handle refugees, coordinate supply lines, or even share basic intelligence effectively." "How long until complete breakdown?" Taemin asked. So Young pulled up a complex mathematical model. "At this rate, 3 more months until the council ceases to function as a governing body. Individual species will start withdrawing to protect themselves. And the Vorthons? They'll control half the galaxy within a year." The prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, the Zephyrian High Council announced their formal withdrawal from the Galactic Council. They cited irreconcilable communication barriers and strategic incompetence as their reasons for leaving. Their departure triggered a cascade. The Rockling Collective voted to recall their fleets to defend only their home systems. 3 smaller species followed suit, abandoning any pretense of galactic cooperation. Council leader Zaltharon found himself commanding a fragmenting alliance with no effective way to communicate between the remaining members. The Vorthon advance continued unopposed, sweeping through system after system of poorly defended worlds. In desperation, Zaltharon authorized something he had sworn never to do, a secret diplomatic mission to Earth. Not an official council action which would be too humiliating to admit publicly. A personal plea from someone who was finally beginning to understand what they had lost. The envoy would be Velnara, a young diplomat who had worked closely with humans before their departure. She would go to the Sol system and see if there was any way to convince the humans to return. But when Velnara's ship approached Earth's solar system, she discovered something that shocked her. The space around Earth was heavily defended by sleek human warships unlike anything she remembered from the Council days. The humans hadn't been sitting idle during their absence from galactic affairs. They had been building something new, and that something was about to change everything. Velnara's diplomatic ship, the Peaceful Current, approached the edge of human space with growing nervousness. She had expected to find the Sol system defended by the same human ships she remembered from Council service. Sturdy but unremarkable vessels that focused on function over appearance. Instead, she found herself facing warships that looked like they belonged to an entirely different civilization. The human patrol vessels were sleek and elegant, with curved hulls that seemed to flow like water frozen in motion. Their weapons were integrated seamlessly into their design, almost invisible until they powered up. Most surprisingly, they moved with perfect coordination, like dancers performing a complex routine. Captain Sejun of the HSS Incheon hailed her ship personally. Velnara was surprised to see him. She remembered Sejun from his days as a young officer in the Council Defense Force, but now he wore the uniform of an independent human fleet. "Ambassador Velnara," Sejun said politely through the communication link. "Welcome to human space. I understand you've requested an audience with our government." "Yes," Velnara replied, trying to hide her amazement at the advanced human ships surrounding her. "I carry messages from the Galactic Council regarding the current crisis." Sejun's expression didn't change, but Velnara's telepathic abilities picked up a slight feeling of amusement from him. "I see. Please follow my ship to Earth. But I should warn you, you may find some things have changed since your people last visited." During the journey to Earth, Sejun gave Velnara a tour of the Incheon. The ship was unlike anything she had seen before. The human technology had advanced dramatically in just 6 months. "How is this possible?" Velnara asked as they walked through engineering sections that seemed to run themselves. "When humans left the Council, your technology was impressive but not revolutionary." Sejun smiled. "When you spend 50 years solving everyone else's problems, you don't have much time to work on your own. Once we stopped being the galaxy's mediators, we discovered we had a lot of energy and creativity to focus on ourselves. But this level of advancement in such a short time. We learned from everyone we helped," Sejun explained. Zephyrian crystal technology, Veltari mental interfaces, Korthak swarm coordination, Rockling defensive systems. We studied it all while we were mediating disputes and keeping peace. Now we've combined the best ideas into something new. Velnara realized with growing alarm that humans hadn't just left the Council. They had taken 50 years of accumulated knowledge and used it to leap ahead technologically. While the alien species were struggling to communicate with each other, humans had been quietly becoming more advanced than any of them. On Earth, Velnara was escorted to a meeting with President Minseo. The human leader received her in a simple but elegant office overlooking a city that bustled with activity and prosperity. "Ambassador Velnara," Minseo said warmly, "it's good to see you again. I hope your journey was comfortable." "President Minseo," Velnara replied formally. "I bring greetings from Council Leader Zaltharon and urgent messages about the Vorthon crisis." Minseo gestured to a comfortable chair. "Please sit. Would you like some tea? I remember you enjoyed human green tea during your time at the Council." The kindness in Minseo's voice made Velnara's mission feel even more difficult. She had come to ask for help from people the council had treated poorly, and they were being gracious hosts. The Vorthans have taken 23 star systems, Velnara began without accepting the tea. Millions of beings are fleeing their homes. The council fleets cannot coordinate effectively against their bioships. I'm aware of the situation, Minseo said calmly. Our intelligence networks are quite good. Then you know that civilized space is in danger. The council formally requests human assistance in containing the Vorthan threat. Minseo raised an eyebrow. Requests? That's interesting. The message we received used the word demands. It said humans have obligations to the galactic community. Velnara felt her blue skin flush darker. Perhaps the translation was imperfect. The council values human expertise and would appreciate your help. I see. Minseo leaned back in her chair. And what exactly does the council propose in exchange for this help? The question caught Velnara off guard. Exchange? This is about defending civilization against a common threat. Of course, Minseo agreed. But let's be practical. For 50 years, humans provided mediation, peacekeeping, and crisis management services to the council. Those services had value even if no one ever calculated their worth. Defense Minister Jong-soo, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, spoke up. Our economists estimate that human services saved the council approximately 12 trillion credits over 5 decades. The value of our peacekeeping operations alone would have bankrupted most member species if they had to hire private security. Velnara felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. She had come expecting to appeal to human goodwill and moral duty. Instead, she was facing a business negotiation. The council cannot pay for military assistance, she said honestly. The war has already strained our resources. We're not asking for payment, Minseo said gently. We're asking for respect, recognition, a seat at the table as equals, not as servants who clean up everyone else's messes. But humans always had representation in the council. Did we? Strategic advisor Yunji entered the conversation. She was a brilliant woman who had served as a council consultant before the human departure. How many human proposals were approved in the last 5 years? How many times were human warnings heeded before they became crises? Velnara couldn't answer. She knew the truth. Human advice had been ignored consistently, their warnings dismissed, their suggestions voted down by species who then came running for help when things went wrong. The council has learned from past mistakes, Velnara said weakly. Things would be different if humans returned. Would they? Yunji asked. Or would the council go back to taking human services for granted the moment the crisis passed? Before Velnara could answer, an aide entered with urgent news. Madam President, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. Vorthan bioships have engaged our colonial defense forces. Minseo's expression became serious. What's the situation? 3 Vorthan attack groups attempted to raid the new Busan trade routes. The colonial fleet intercepted them. Admiral Hyun-sik is commanding the defense personally. Velnara felt hope rising in her chest. You see? The threat affects humans too. We must work together. But Minseo's next words crushed that hope. Patch me through to Admiral Hyun-sik. The communication screen activated, showing the bridge of a human warship. Admiral Hyun-sik appeared, looking calm despite being in the middle of a battle. Madam President, he reported, the Vorthan raiders have been repelled. Their bioships were more advanced than Council intelligence suggested, but our new weapon systems proved effective. Casualties? Minseo asked. Minimal. The coordination protocols worked perfectly. The Vorthan seemed confused by our tactics. I don't think they expected this level of organized resistance. Velnara stared at the screen in shock. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had won easily against the same Vorthan forces that had been devastating Council fleets. Any prisoners? Minseo inquired. Several damaged bioships were captured. Our science teams are already studying their adaptive capabilities. We should have countermeasures developed within the week. After the communication ended, Velnara sat in stunned silence. The humans weren't struggling against the Vorthan threat. They were handling it with ease while conducting scientific research on captured enemy technology. You see our position? Minseo said gently. The Vorthan expansion doesn't threaten human space. Our colonies are well defended. Our technology is advancing rapidly. Our people are prosperous and secure. But the other species, Velnara began, are learning the value of the services they took for granted. Yunji finished. Some of them are already reaching out to human colonies directly, offering fair compensation for protection and mediation services. You're breaking up the council, Velnara accused. The council broke itself up, Minseo corrected. We just stopped holding it together with our unpaid labor. As Velnara prepared to leave Earth, she realized her mission had failed completely. The humans weren't going to save the council. They had built something better, and were perfectly willing to let their former colleagues learn hard lessons about cooperation and respect. The most devastating realization was that the humans were right. The council had treated them as servants rather than partners. Now those servants had become competitors, and they were winning. When Velnara's ship departed the Sol system, she carried with her the knowledge that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans hadn't just left the council, they had evolved beyond it. And behind them they left a fragmented alliance facing its darkest hour alone. Velnara returned to the Galactic Council with news that no one wanted to hear. She stood before the emergency assembly, looking at the half-empty chamber where dozens of species used to gather. Many had withdrawn their representatives as the crisis deepened. The humans will not return, she announced simply. Council leader Zaltharon's silver skin darkened with anger. Did you explain the gravity of the situation? The threat to all civilized species? They understand the threat perfectly, Velnara replied. They also understand that it doesn't threaten them. Human space is well defended, their colonies are prosperous, and their technology has advanced beyond anything we saw during their council service. Impossible, scoffed Velnash, the Veltari representative. 6 months ago, human ships were barely adequate for patrol duty. 6 months ago, humans were spending all their time and resources solving our problems, Velnara said quietly. Now they focus on themselves and the results are remarkable. She activated a holographic display showing her recordings from the human fleet. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as sleek human warships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons and defenses far superior to anything in the council arsenals. Furthermore, Velnara continued, the humans have successfully repelled Vorthon attacks on their territory. They captured several bioships and are developing countermeasures. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives demanded to know how the humans had advanced so quickly. Others insisted that Velnara must be mistaken about human capabilities. But the truth became undeniable over the following weeks. Reports filtered in from across the galaxy of human colonial fleets protecting trade routes, escorting refugee ships, and maintaining order in sectors the council could no longer patrol. The humans weren't doing this for free anymore. They charged fair prices for their services, and many alien traders found it cheaper and more reliable than trying to coordinate with the dysfunctional council bureaucracy. On the rim world of New Sol, Governor Hee-jin reviewed the latest contracts with satisfaction. 18 new security agreements this month, she told her staff. The Antares Mining Consortium wants our ships to protect their entire operation. At what rate? Asked her economic advisor. Triple what we used to charge the council, and they're happy to pay it. This was happening throughout human space. The colonies that had once been overlooked backwaters were becoming wealthy centers of trade and security. Independent human settlements were forming networks of mutual cooperation that worked better than the old council system ever had. But the most significant development was happening on Earth itself. President Minseo met with her cabinet to discuss something unprecedented. Formal diplomatic contact with species outside the old council structure. The hegemony of distant suns has requested an embassy exchange, Foreign Minister Inho reported. They're a coalition of 12 species from the galactic south. They've watched our departure from the council with interest. What do they want? Minseo asked. Partnership, trade agreements, technology sharing. They offer us something the council never did, respect as equals. Defense Minister Jong-soo added his own report. The Stellar Commonwealth has proposed a mutual defense treaty. They're facing expansion pressure from the Vorthons and want human expertise in fleet coordination. Are they willing to pay fair compensation for our services? More than fair. They've studied how the council treated us and want to avoid those mistakes. Minseo smiled slightly. It seems our departure has created opportunities we never expected. Meanwhile, the old council continued to fracture. The Zephyrian withdrawal had triggered a cascade of departures. 3 more species formally left the alliance, and 2 others recalled their fleets to defend only their home systems. Council leader Zaltharon found himself commanding an organization that barely existed. The remaining species couldn't coordinate military action, couldn't maintain trade relationships, and couldn't even hold meaningful meetings without constant translation failures. The breaking point came when the Vorthan forces penetrated deep into the galactic core, threatening the Council's seat of government itself. The bioships had adapted to every weapon and tactic the fragmented alien fleets could deploy. In desperation, Zaltharon authorized a final gambit. If the Council couldn't defeat the Vorthans alone, perhaps they could hire someone who could. The message sent to Earth was very different from the previous demands. It was humble, respectful, and honest about the Council's failures. "We have made mistakes," the message admitted. "We took human contributions for granted and ignored human wisdom. We understand if you cannot forgive us, but we ask, not as a right but as a favor, if there is any way humanity might help us survive this crisis." President Minseo read the message with her senior staff. The tone was completely different from the arrogant demands they had received before. "They're finally being honest," observed Defense Minister Jiangsu. "The question is whether honesty is enough," replied Strategic Advisor Yunji. "They're asking us to save a system that consistently treated us poorly. What are our options?" Minseo asked. "We could ignore them completely," Jiangsu said. "Let the Council collapse and build new relationships with individual species and other alliances. We could offer limited assistance," Yunji suggested. "Help with the Vorthan threat but not rejoin the Council. Or we could use this as an opportunity to rebuild galactic civilization properly," Minseo mused. "On terms that respect human contributions and create lasting cooperation." The decision came when Admiral Hyun-sik requested permission to lead a humanitarian mission. The Vorthan advance was creating massive refugee crises, and human colonies couldn't ignore the suffering. "We don't have to save the Council," Hyun-sik argued during a secure conference call, "but we can save the people caught in this disaster, and in doing so, we can demonstrate what competent leadership looks like." Minseo approved the mission with specific conditions. Human forces would operate independently, not under Council command. They would coordinate with any species willing to follow human tactical doctrine, and they would make it clear that this was a humanitarian intervention, not a return to the old system. The Battle of the Galactic Core became a legend that would be told for generations. Admiral Hyun-sik commanded a fleet of human ships, supported by vessels from species that had chosen to trust human leadership. The key to victory wasn't superior firepower, though human technology had advanced considerably. It was coordination and communication. Human ships shared information instantly across the entire fleet. Orders were executed simultaneously by ships from a dozen different species. The Vorthan bioships, which had adapted to fighting disorganized enemies, found themselves facing a unified force that anticipated their every move. The bioships' greatest strength, their ability to adapt, became their weakness when facing an enemy that could adapt faster through superior coordination and information sharing. When the battle ended, the Vorthan forces were in full retreat. Their expansion had been stopped, their bioships were being studied by human scientists, and their threat to galactic civilization was neutralized. But the victory came with a price for the old order. The species that had fought alongside human forces had seen what competent leadership looked like. They had experienced real coordination and effective communication. Many of them chose to maintain their relationships with human commanders rather than return to the dysfunctional council system. Council leader Zaltharon faced the final irony of the crisis. The humans had saved galactic civilization, but they had also made the old Galactic Council obsolete. Species were choosing to work directly with human colonies or join new alliances that offered the competence and respect the Council had never provided. "The Council is finished," Thexamar told Zaltharon as they watched news reports of various species signing agreements with human settlements. Not because the humans destroyed it, but because they showed everyone what functional cooperation looks like. Zaltharon could only nod. The humans had departed quietly, leaving the Council to face its darkest hour alone. But in doing so, they had forced the galaxy to confront a harsh truth. They had been dependent on a species they had consistently undervalued and mistreated. Now that species had grown beyond their former role, The humans were no longer the galaxy's servants or mediators. They were its leaders, and they were building something better than what had come before. The old Galactic Council died not with violence or revolution, but with the quiet realization that its time had passed. The humans had departed, leaving behind a lesson that echoed across the stars. Respect and cooperation must be earned, not demanded, and in their wake, a new galactic civilization was being born, one built on mutual respect, fair compensation for services, and the recognition that some contributions are too valuable to be taken for granted. The humans had indeed departed quietly, but their absence had spoken louder than any declaration of war ever could.